Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. As always, I'm your host, Trevor, and today we are going to be talking about realignment. We're going back to that beloved issue that everyone loves to keep talking about and breaking down. I thought we were good on this until 2030, but we're still going. And with me to help me break it down from the Big Ten perspective tonight is JR from the Big Ten Huddle. JR, thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here. Always willing to talk some conference realignment. It always gets the numbers, so let's do it.
People love it, and it's not going away. And so tonight we want to do kind of a different angle, is looking at this from, we're basically going to grade the schools that have most commonly been linked to a Big Ten expansion based on a few criteria, and listed in there and put a grade to it, and then see kind of who comes out on top, and if all these schools, who's kind of the realistic candidates and who's more of a pretender here on this. So before we get into that, can you talk to me high level about what the Big Ten is really looking for in expansion candidates if it does end up expanding again?
Sure. Yeah, the Big Ten obviously added Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA. A large part of that seemed to be trying to get not just better teams, but also good academic institutions and also expanding out into the West Coast. It helps with recruiting. And then obviously the big one of the media markets and everything like that. From everything I can tell and everybody I listen to and talk to kind of behind the scenes, I don't have like the best conference realignment sources in the world, but I know enough people to kind of talk about what is happening here and there. And it seems to be a lot of the same stuff that, you would think about the Big Ten was looking for before. They want to continue to try to outreach into new states, new media markets. They want to continue to try to expand the recruiting footprint. They think these are the areas where they can really set themselves apart from other conferences, number one. And then number two, also try to become its own, I don't want to use the word super league because that gets used too much in other areas, and I think it would misconstrue the idea I'm going for here, but it just kind of set itself apart as a conference where there's really nothing else like it. A big thing they're talking about right now is that they are the only nationwide conference. And so I think the more this conference expands, the more you're going to try to see it go throughout the country. We're going to talk about a number of teams on here, and although some of them have not been, highly talked about, I do think there's possibilities when it comes into trying to expand the conference so that way there's some more going on between, Illinois and California. And then there's also some possibilities about going south. And would the conference be willing to maybe get two teams from down in Florida? Would they be willing to go after an SEC team? I think all of these things are on the table. And that geography is a huge piece of what they go for. The media market obviously has to match as well. But I think the more and more they talk about this nationwide conference, the more and more I feel like they're not just looking for Notre Dame. They're not just looking for Stanford, right? They're looking to expand, become larger, and not just have the best brands, but also get the most kind of nationwide stuff. And then obviously the academics, you have to be a good academic school. I think AAU is the best place to start with that. I don't think it's the end all be all, but I definitely think that needs to be something that your school takes seriously is your academics if you want to have the opportunity to be invited into the Big Ten. Don't think we'll see anything on it in the next year or two. I think we're probably going to stay silent a little bit on that, but we can get into that later if you want, or do you want me to talk about timeline right now?
Yeah, let's talk timeline.
All right, so timeline. I think when we start getting into when our team's going to be added, the ACC has a lot of prospects for this. Now, I don't think everybody from the ACC or every prospect is from the ACC. There's obviously some prospects that have been talked about in the Big 12. I teased a little bit of an SEC prospect that has been talked about as well, so it's not like anything super groundbreaking. However, I think the ACC is really the one here that's going to kind of kickstart some of this. They edited their grant of rights deals where essentially now teams are paying less and less for those per year. And what it sounds like when you listen to the insiders from those schools and just when you're looking at what teams have paid for stuff before, it sounds like around 2030 is the is probably the quickest time when you could see a team leave the ACC and come to either the Big Ten or maybe even the Big 12 or maybe even the SEC, right? I mean, wherever they want to go, whatever happens to that conference. So if we're going to look at timeline, 2030, 2031 is where they probably are added to one of those conferences. I think 2027 is probably the quickest that we'll hear about that, whether it's during the 2027 season or kind of in the off season during 2028. That would be my best guess.
So you think, like in these other rounds, we'll know a couple years in advance prior to it actually taking place?
Yeah, similar to Texas and Oklahoma and USC, UCLA getting about a year or two, a little bit of notice. I think the rumblings will start a little bit sooner than that. Kind of like we have now, but they're not super
Rumblings haven't
strong.
stopped.
I was gonna say we kind of have rumblings now, but I think we'll see kind of more of the stronger stuff. Like we got that report from the North Carolina site talking about the SEC. I think you'll start seeing more of that around 2027, and then you might see things solidify in maybe 2028, 2029.
Yeah. Interesting. So you hit upon a lot of interesting things, and we'll get into that as we go through by each candidate and we grade them out, and we'll get into a little bit more of the details. But in terms of like geography, for example, that can mean a lot of different things depending on the school you're looking at, and they have options in terms of trying to bridge gap, trying to expand even new directions, whatever. So it's going to be fun to get into all this and kind of break it down. Before we do you have any predictions in terms of first how much more do you think the Big Ten will expand? How many more members do you think realistically they would look to add? And do you have a guess right now, like your gut feeling or your impression on who those schools, most likely schools, would be?
Yeah, when you start talking about numbers, that's where it kind of gets the most tricky because I truly do believe the Big Ten wants to stay ahead of the SEC and the Big 12 to a certain extent as well. But I think mainly right now, when they look at realignment, it seems like the two hungriest are probably the Big Ten and the SEC. So I think they're probably looking at them a little bit more. However, I think the Big Ten is happy right now at 18. I feel like if they add too many more, they feel like they could be getting too big. And really, the rumblings that we've heard when they're going to start talking about, the payouts for schools and stuff like that. There was one athletic director, the Washington athletic director, I think his name is Pat Chin. He was talking about the restructuring of deals is probably going to start around 2030, which is another reason why I think that's probably when we'll start seeing teams added. And around that time, he was talking about how the payouts might not be completely equal amongst every team in the conference. If that happens, that could either mean one of two things: either they add a team or two, and they are a half share or something like that, or they start doing something like what the ACC did, which is larger conference payouts for teams that are on TV more and stuff like that. I personally think that'd be a terrible decision to do that. I think you're pissing a lot of people off for no good reason. However, if they did decide to go that route, I could see it making some schools happier, and then the other schools that aren't as happy, it's like, okay, well, you don't have as many viewers as the other schools, so you're not as valuable to our TV contract and stuff like that. But I think if I had to put a solid number on it, I don't think they'll go over 24. I don't think the Big Ten, that's kind of what my gut tells me. I don't think they'll go over 24 teams. I feel like at that point in time, you really get too big. And also, you can only really add all that many without really losing that kind of label that the Big Ten, or not I apologize, you can really gain that label by that time. Anything over that, it really just seems like you're just expanding for no real good purpose. And at the end of the day, anybody that comes into the Big Ten has to add value to the conference, so that way everybody else is getting a larger payout that way. So you add. And I'm just shooting teams here off the top of my head: Arizona State, North Carolina, Miami, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, and Stanford and Texas A&M. You add those teams, I don't see how you add any more teams to really increase your media market footprint any more than that. You might add Florida State with Miami or something, but who's to say they don't have a better offer from the SEC? Because that's what you have to consider as well. The Big Ten and the SEC can only grow so much more until eventually there's no real more schools that can really add value to their conference.
Yeah, for me, I mean, from the get go, I've been I don't know, an advocate of smaller, more regional conferences. I know that's going back in time. I know I'm sounding like the old man on his porch that, get off my lawn. And in reality, that's me. But so I'll own that. But it's just it's too big. You're not able to play enough of the teams in your conference consistently. So, like, whatever, if you want to have a conference that goes from California to New Jersey, whatever. But if you're that far apart and you're also only playing like once every 6 years or whatever, at one point when you start, I don't know how it would break down with you get so big, then like, I don't know what is the point of being that big at some point. And at that point, it feels like you're in it for the sake of the conference, not so much the sake of the schools or what they provide. Because I feel like you lose that regionality, you lose those rivalries, that history. Especially like Big Ten schools that have been together since not last century, but the prior century in the same conference, and they don't get to play each other on a regular basis. To me, that's criminal. But so anyway, so we've
Well,
talked a lot.
let me be clear on one thing really quick. I don't disagree with you. I like more regionality as well. Expanding to the West Coast out there, it's like, okay, I see the benefit in some ways, but at the same time, I don't exactly love it either. Number one, and then number two, it's money. Like this is what's driving everything right now. How can we get a bigger TV deal? How can we get more of a national brand, stuff like that? However, when you look at it from a fan perspective, I'm in agreement with you. I would rather smaller conferences and more regionality. Bring back the Big Eight.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and I almost forgot. So let me say, if you think it could go up to 24, that's six more. So who would be your top six teams that you think are most likely to get in? And then we'll compare after we've done the scores tonight. Granted, we're the ones doing the score, so there
Yeah.
might be a little bias in there. But then we'll see if it kind of comes out and reflects what you think.
Yeah, so I shift on these a little bit. I put a video out with my top 10 not too long ago. And every now and then you hear something here, you hear something there, and you kind of weight this team a little bit different there. So I would say my consistent five or six that I've thought the entire time have been Notre Dame, I think, is the big fish, the one they want the most. I think North Carolina is the other one that's kind of like the sneaky underrated one that they want really, really bad. I also think Georgia Tech is up there. I think that's a huge media market for them to be able to, go down there. And then also the recruiting and everything else is a big bonus. I think you have to get one of the Florida schools, whether that's Miami or Florida State. I think they would love to get one of those. I think they're more partial to Miami personally, but at the same time, Florida State's also had more of the rumblings. So who really knows? The other one that is on there, but I think they're probably more of a lean to the SEC is Clemson, just because they're really not in the South Carolina area. Now, if they get North Carolina, I think they're probably going to consider that the Carolinas, and I don't think they're going to go after both. So I think it's probably North Carolina, South Carolina. But then you also have the issue with Duke, So what do you do there? Because North Carolina, that state is not going to just let North Carolina go and then not bring Duke with them. It's kind of the same thing with Virginia and Virginia Tech, right? So some of these issues are also state political issues that you have to go through. If I had to give my final one, and it's probably either between Stanford or Texas A&M, because I know I just Stanford would fit so well. Stanford or Cal, either one of them would fit so well with the academics, everything else they want. But they've already said no to Stanford, and there's the whole drama with USC and them not wanting to bring any other California schools in there. USC and UCLA wanted to be the only West Coast schools in the Big Ten, so they actually weren't too happy when Oregon and Washington came in. However, that's how it worked. They added value to the conference, so that's what they did. And then, like I said, the other one is probably Texas A&M, just because you can continue to get down into kind of that southern footprint. And I do think that the Big Ten would would consider that a huge win to be able to get into SEC and Big 12 country.
All righty. Well, let's get into it. Before we do, since we are talking Big Ten tonight, I think I got to switch out my hats a little bit. So I got this hat. I don't know if we talked about this last time. I grew up in Michigan, not far from Ann Arbor. And so that was kind of my local team I root for. Now, I understand with the punishments that have been doled out, this is really bad timing. So,
hey, listen, you're not paying the fines, man. You're fine. You're not paying the fines.
There's a championship, and that's a whole nother conversation. I'd be happy to have it another time, but it is what it is at this point. So we'll see how that goes going forward. But all right, so let's go ahead and get into this and score here. So here's how we broke it down. We basically, there's a lot of more categories or subcategories, but we basically summed it by brand, academics, geography, cultural fit, and then football competitiveness. I think all of which you kind of touched upon there in the intro. And there we have these teams as well as several more as I scroll over, but we're going to start here. And let's see, can I make this? Does it let me go bigger? No. Okay. Sheets only let you go 200. We're going to go through it and rank them 1 to 10 on each of these. We'll get a kind of a composite score and we'll move on. But so as we get into this, so you talked about brand, there's no question. Notre Dame, and we could make
10.
this as scientific as we wanted and like put like metrics based on, ratings and all this. We don't need to. Like most of the stuff we can gut check and we know like Notre Dame's a 10, right? Academics, they did recently get AAU status, I think last year, maybe the year before. Maybe they're not known quite as well in terms of research. Like I said, they kind of just got in, but they're still there. Where would you rank them? Like, are we 9
yeah,
or
8 or 9? I think there's other teams that would be considered with probably better, but they're still right up there. So 8 or 9, you take your pick.
Let's go with 8. Okay, geography, and now this is where it's interesting, and I want to touch upon this because geography, it all goes down to priorities, right? Like in terms of like old school conferences, geography, it was a great fit. Nowadays, not only are you in that state, it's in a really small part of that state. It doesn't really bring a lot inherently with where it's at, but it does have that kind of goes in with the national brand. And so depends on how you look at geography in terms of, well, their brand supersedes geography. I don't know. How would you look at this? This is an interesting one.
Yeah, so when I looked at geography, I also looked at media market. And for me, Notre Dame, if you just look at geography, they're like a 3 or a 4. But when you take the media market into consideration, I'd probably make them, like a 9. It's not a 10 because they're in a state with 2 other Big Ten teams, but it's such a national brand, Notre Dame, that you almost can't even consider where it's at because it's kind of like one of those, Ohio State, Texas, where they just have alumni that's kind of everywhere, all over the place, that really you're kind of tapping into a bunch of different media markets and just the national brand of it all by having Notre Dame. So if we're just going by geography, I'd honestly say like a 3 or a 4. But if we're taking the media market into it as well, I'd probably do again an 8 or a 9, but probably lean toward the 9.
Yeah, I was going to lean towards 9 on that one as well. And so, I mean, the media market's interesting because when they were creating the Big Ten network, and that led to them grabbing Maryland and Rutgers, it really did matter the market you're in. Whereas nowadays, that does still feel important, but it really feels like your brand with everything going more national media and with streaming online, that it's really about you're not just going to be viewed in your media market, you are going to be viewed nationally through all these streaming platforms or whatever, right? And like, so how much is that taken into account? Like, is that strategy shifting? Or are they like, look, we don't need to pick up a Maryland just because they're in a big market. We now want to bring people who bring a little bit more as well.
Yeah, I think the media markets still matter, but like you said, maybe not to the extent that they once did, streaming and everything else. And Notre Dame has proven that even with Peacock streaming numbers, they can still do great numbers. So, and that's really what a lot of these places want to pay for, right? They want to pay for you to get people not just to watch their channel, but also to sign up for their subscription services. And that's what Peacock has actually done pretty well with adding the Big Ten. They have a number of Big Ten teams that are there. Notre Dame plays there as well, which is just one more reason when you look at the media market, Notre Dame is favored that highly because of the already existing connection between NBC and Peacock in the Big Ten.
Okay. And then cultural fit, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd say this is a 10.
Yeah, I had him. I had him up there as a 10 to, they are private university, and the Big Ten does have Northwestern, which is a private university as well. So it's not unheard of to have anything like that. Yeah, I think Midwest fit stuff like that. Yeah, I'd probably give him a 10.
Yeah, and I also think of a lot of rivalries, from over the years. So I get we can do 9 if you're leaning more towards that. They you're right. They don't exactly fit like the exact mo of a lot of these universities. Um,
Yeah, I'd still go with a 10 because you
oh,
got
okay.
Michigan, you got USC. If you did decide to add Stanford, you have that. So when you already have 2 or 3 possible rivalries in the conference, seems like cultural fit's pretty high up there.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that's going to be interesting with realignment. We'll see is if they were able to land Notre Dame, how much does that boost the chances of some of these other schools? So we'll get into that. And then football competitiveness, they were kind of, I wouldn't say mid, but amongst the blue bloods, they were kind of mid for a while. They'd get ranked real high and then not make much noise. But after last year, you have to say they've been doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean they're still a team that's going to be up there. They had their drought where they weren't really making going to be able to do anything in the bowl games and stuff. But they just took down Georgia, took down Indiana, Penn State this past playoff run. Marcus Freeman's a really good coach, so competitiveness I'd say 9 or 10.
Yeah. Um, Also leave them at 9 just because it has been down for a while. But I mean, that's easily a 10 at any given point. They obviously have the resources and the prowess. So Notre Dame, let's see, 9.2. No real surprise there. I think actually in some ways I almost expect to be higher, but uh, the question with Notre Dame isn't so much uh, would the Big Ten take them, because that has been, I think, something they wanted for a long time. I mean, they had 11 members, would have loved to have made them the 12th for a long time. Notre Dame has rebuffed those advances, I guess, time and again. So the question would be, does Notre Dame want to join, or does at some point do the rule changes or whatever, or do they feel forced to join the Big Ten in order to stay competitive?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question. It's just whenever Notre Dame is ready to do so, whether they're forced to do it or they want to do it. To me, when Notre Dame does decide to join a conference, it'll be the Big Ten. So it's probably a matter of when rather than if, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, and it's interesting because they've actually sided with the Big 12 and ACC and some things with like the playoff format recently, which on the opposite side of the Big Ten. So I think again it shows they are trying to keep things as such that they can remain independent. So until that changes and it's no longer viable for them to compete for championships as an independent, I think they will choose to do so. So. A very interesting dynamic, though, but obviously a huge get for the Big Ten if and when that happens. Let's move on to UNC because I put them next because out of the ACC, it's so funny because they are not like when you think of football, which is really the big driver of realignment, that you don't think of UNC really. I know they're getting Bill Belichick, and that's great, but they really haven't done anything with him yet. They've put forward solid teams, but not your big football brand. But they seem to be at the center of realignment, even more so than some of these other schools. And my feeling is because they make just as much sense for the Big Ten as they do for the SEC. Whereas a lot of these other schools, like maybe they the reasoning maybe changes a little bit, but for like they're the one that just kind of would fit so well either way, so seamlessly by checking all the boxes that both sides need. And so that makes them a real interesting figure in all this, and ultimately they may end up having their choice as to which conference they want to end up in, which I think would cause a series of dominoes in the rest of the those teams. But let's go ahead and rank them. So in terms of brand, obviously UNC is a huge brand, which is why they're involved here. But like I was just saying, with football, it's not the strongest brand, but they still have a really big brand from basketball and just from their history. And so, how would you rank them on this?
Yeah, I gave him about a 7 on brand. It's a very good brand for football. It's not elite, and then basketball is in there too, but it just kind of depends on how much you weight basketball. If you give them an
Kind of
even,
80-20 or
yeah, if you give like basketball like an even with the football, then they're probably up at like 8 or 9. But yeah, if you have them down to like 25, 30, or even 20% of the brand is basketball, you're probably looking at a 6 or 7, and I think probably 7 is the safest bet here.
okay. And then academics, I don't think we need to debate this much. I think they're a pretty easy 10.
Yeah, 10.
Geography, I mean, this is where I go to. I mean, this isn't an SEC perspective, but they fit with what the SEC is looking for. But they're also Big Ten. It's great because they're still relatively close to a wing of the Big Ten, but also a new market and a big market, and one that neither of the Big Ten or SEC is in yet.
Yeah, I went with an 8 here. New market, top 25 market. It's not top 20, so it's not exactly the best thing in the world. But you could probably convince me a 7 if you wanted to. But because it's a new state and a new opportunity there on the East Coast with Maryland and everything else, I'd probably go with either a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, and it's not quite SEC territory, but you're starting to bleed into it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cultural fit. How does UNC fit? Now, like we said, kind of a new geography, which is kind of impacts a little bit. But in terms of the university, um, I think there might be more of a fit.
Yeah, like rivalries and stuff like that. You really don't have too much, with what's in the conference. However, I do think North Carolina kind of, treats themselves and holds themselves to a similar standard that most Big Ten places do. I'd want to go with a 10, but when we're looking at other schools like Notre Dame and stuff like that, they just don't have the rivalries there. So I'd probably have to go with more of a 9, but it's still really high up there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They're not quite on that Notre Dame level. And then football competitiveness.
Yeah, it's interesting. You had what was the really good quarterbacks? You had Sam Howell, and what was his name right after him? The quarterback for the Patriots now. I'm forgetting his name, but anyway, you've had some good quarterbacks there, and you've done some nice things. Chip Lindsey, new Michigan offensive coordinator, was there. Mac Brown was, he's a big name, and they went out and got him. I don't think they're the most competitive, school out there. However, you can tell they're trying to do that. So I almost want to give them an extra point for the competitiveness. But I think probably right around 7, not elite, but, a respected program and one that's trying to get up there. I'd say 7. You could convince me with an 8, but 7 is probably where I'd stay.
I was thinking 6, 7. I mean, I would say they're above average. I
Mm-hmm.
probably. I mean, it feels like they're often in at least in bowl games, not really ever meaningful ones, but I think seven's a good one. And so, actually, UNC coming in a little bit lower than I would have expected. Um,
It'll all be relative to the rest of them, right? We'll see what the rest of them come out
it
as.
will be. And so, you've already alluded to this going into Florida. So, Florida State's obviously making big noise trying to get out and trying to get into one of the big conferences. Again, they're one that, as opposed to UNC, who I think makes perfect sense for both conferences. Florida State makes a lot of sense in some ways for the Big Ten and a lot of sense for other ways for the SEC. So how do they fit in here with what the Big Ten's looking for?
Yeah, when you look at the brand, I mean, we gave Notre Dame a really high brand for the the national championships and their history and stuff like that. Let's not forget, Florida State has had some national championships recently. What was it, back 2013, I believe it was, with Jameis Winston, and before that as well. So this is a school with some really good brand. They're still being talked about quite a bit, even only after getting 2 wins last season. I mean, you see a school in the Big Ten like Illinois or somebody like that get 2 wins. They're basically going to be an afterthought for everybody else. Sorry, I'm not trying to pick on Illinois here. They were just the first one that came to my mind. But I think, they're higher than North Carolina, probably lower than Notre Dame. So I'd say probably give them a 9.
9. Okay. All right. I mean, if they're a 9, then there's the rest of these
What were
schools
you going to give them? What were you going to
trouble.
give them?
Yeah, 9, 10. I mean, I do think Notre Dame's I don't know. I personally I think Notre Dame's a slightly bigger brand, and so I think putting Florida State at 9, but I still kind of they're right up there
Yeah.
with the best of college football in terms of national brand. But I think
Mm-hmm.
9 is fair. Okay, academics, not AAU, but making a big push for it. Having said that, it feels like they're still kind of academically set up maybe more like a Big Ten school than like a Notre Dame in some regards from things that I've read. Not that I'm an expert on that aspect of it, but
Yeah, I'm sure some Florida State fans will probably watch this video and disagree with me here, and that's fine. But I just don't think Florida State's known for their academics. Like you said, they're not AAU. They might be fighting for it, but they're not there yet. And then also, some teams in the conference, they might not be AAU, right? Like Nebraska's not AAU, but there is still a strong aspect to some of the research that they do, and they're known nationally. They do a lot of things that get added to studies and stuff like that. Florida State's not really one that comes to my mind in that area. Again, the Florida State fans will probably disagree with me here. That's fine, but honestly, I'd probably go with like a 5 or a 6.
whew, okay. I'm going to be generous here and give them a 6, but
Yeah, don't make them too mad. Good for you.
I do think, and I do believe, like from things I've seen, that they are making a strong push, and it could, other than it's kind of political, but it seems like they really want to make that happen or making big strides. But we'll see. Okay, so geography, again, based on what you've laid out with the Big Ten already, how would you rank them with this?
Yeah, Tallahassee, not like a huge media market, right? That's kind of the thing with some of these Florida schools is that they don't really have like the biggest media markets in the world. When we get to Miami, we'll talk about that a little bit more. However, Tallahassee is not exactly a huge media market. They I think that they have some more national reach to them than maybe just the Tallahassee market, obviously. And when this school is good, they're going to do really well. However, I just don't think I see them on the same level of a media market geography as I do North Carolina and Notre Dame. Even with the smaller media market, though, I'll still give them a 7 just because I do think the Big Ten really wants to get down there in that Florida area.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, how much value is it just to say you are in the state of Florida, which Florida is a hotbed for recruiting, but also be like, hey, we are now in SEC territory. Like, how much of an extra boost do they get for that?
Yeah, it kind of depends on what happens with Miami, right? We'll probably give Miami something similar, maybe a little bit of a boost because they do have a better media market there in Miami than Tallahassee. However, you kind of have two options here. So I don't think they're going to fight, the hardest for Florida State or Miami just because there's two options there. However, they do probably want to walk away with one of those, and the SEC will probably walk away with the other one, or the Big 12. Who knows? The Big 12 might come in there and swoop in and get one of those two.
Okay. So cultural fit with the Big Ten. This is an interesting one.
Yeah, cultural fit. I mean, they really feel like more of an SEC team, right? they have the rivalry with Florida. I feel like they kind of fit down there with more of the SEC, being in the South and things like that. I mean, there are aspects to them, I guess, that could possibly fit the Big Ten a little bit better, but I'm struggling to think of those. So honestly, when you look at cultural fit, it's probably somewhere close to like a 5 or a 6, just because there's really not all that much connection you can find between Florida State and the Big Ten.
Okay. I mean, 5 may even be generous there. Football competitiveness. This is another hard one to pin down, but
Yeah, so football competitiveness, you're definitely looking at the recent national championships, right? I mean, the one in 2013. It's not the most recent in the world, but they were able to go 12 and 0 back in that 2023 season. Unfortunately, they didn't make it to the playoffs. However, I think they could have really challenged for it, especially if they still had Jordan Travis in the playoffs there. So I do need to give them more credit than North Carolina, but I don't think I need to give them the same credit as Notre Dame, or maybe I should because they have been more competitive lately than Notre Dame. You know what? just for the heck of it, let's give them a 9. Piss the Notre Dame fans off a little bit.
And maybe redeem some faith from
Yeah,
the Florida State fans there. But
there you go.
okay, so it's interesting because, like, again, like I said, Big Ten and SEC both have kind of different reasons for wanting Florida State, but they also have very strong reasons for not wanting Florida State, some of which
Hmm.
you kind of outlined there. So it'll be really interesting. It would be so weird if, like, the dominoes fell in such a way that they're like, no, both sides passed on them. That would be why. I don't think it'll happen, but there is a scenario where that could happen.
Yeah, I don't think it'll happen either. I think even if they get into a situation where the payout is similar to the ACC, they still recognize the benefit of being, included in one of the Big Ten or the SEC. So I could see them coming in, even if it's like a half or like a fourth of a share of a conference. I could still see them trying to get added in there, just because it does bring in more opportunity. And then also the thing I didn't mention with the cultural fit, which went into my rating, my grade there. I don't think the Big Ten loves that Florida State has kind of been the driver here to get out of the conference and to get more revenue and stuff like that. I think overall the Big Ten likes it when everybody's cohesive, when everybody is kind of happy with their payments and doesn't complain too much. So I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that maybe is not the best thing in the world for Florida State when the Big Ten and the SEC are considering them.
With all that said, I feel like 5 is generous up there, but we'll leave it.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. So, okay, Clemson, an interesting one, another big brand, one of the few really big brands remaining in the ACC. But again, kind of there's reasons to love and hate them as in terms of a fit with the Big Ten for a lot of reasons. So, what do you think in terms of brand?
Yeah, when I looked at some of like the valuations for the school and the program and stuff like that, they honestly came out very similar to Florida State. My thing with Clemson that I don't know is when Dabo Sweeney is gone, do they have staying power as a brand, right? Do they have that ability to keep the brand and everybody knowing who they are, or if they hire a no good coach, is he going to completely tank it and they got to completely work back for that brand? I think it's better than it just tanks and they have to completely work back for it and people forget about them. But I also don't think they would get the same pub as like a Texas or somebody like that does, where people just continually try to bring them back even if they're not ready for it. So, and I'm not talking about this season, Texas fans. I'm talking about previous seasons when like you weren't getting draft picks and people were still talking about how Texas was going to come back. So I'd
Or
probably give
even
them an
Michigan,
8.
for example, like
Yeah, yeah.
everyone knew, like at some point, Michigan has the resources to be able to put it back together,
Hmm.
cheating or not cheating. But or Nebraska, everyone keeps assuming that they will. At some point, I feel like Nebraska's lost their blue blood status, maybe, but like Clemson is one that I think a lot of people talk about as a blue blood, and they are a modern in the modern sense. But you go back for like they weren't really for a long time, and so you're right. That is a newer thing, relatively speaking. So does that have the staying power? I think is a legit question.
Yeah, I call them a new blood. I try to differentiate between the new bloods and the blue bloods because I do think that, those 8 programs do need to kind of be recognized for the history that they brought to college football. But you're exactly right. Nebraska has fallen off. And so to try to consider them one of the elite programs of college football, it just doesn't really fit. So that's where I kind of use the distinction of new bloods. And I think Clemson fits in that brand of new
Mm,
bloods. So
yeah.
8 seems good to me.
Okay, sweet. In terms of brand, yeah, solid. That makes sense. Okay, academics.
All right, so academics. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. They are not AAU, I believe. So at least the last time I checked.
Right.
But they're kind of a lower research tier as well, kind of similar to Florida State. Honestly, I don't see a whole lot difference here between Clemson and Florida State, unless I'm just missing something. So
I don't
I'd
think they're
honestly,
making the push either, so I would probably
yeah,
keep them below Florida State.
yeah, give them a 5. That would make sense.
Again, not saying it's a bad school. When we talk about fit, it's all that research and all the other stuff that matters to some of these schools. So,
Hmm.
especially in the Big Ten. So, not trying to diss any school here, but just in terms of where they prioritize their resources.
Totally, totally. All right, geography. You want me to start on that?
Yeah, yeah. Let's move on.
All right, let's do geography. So, yeah, geography with Clemson. I do think that there is an aspect there of South Carolina not being, maybe the most media rich market in the area. I do think, Greens is it Greenville, Spartanburg area. It's probably higher than I think some people would give them credit for. When I looked at the media market rankings, they were in the top 40, so they are much higher than a Tallahassee is. However, I think even by the point you get outside of the top 25, I don't know if there's that much of a difference between top 40 and around 100, just because it's like, you're kind of nickel and diamond it there a little bit, it feels like. So, geography wise, the expansion down there into the southeastern area a little bit, I think that is important. Don't love the media market, but I would understand trying to get down there to it. And then South Carolina is also down there. I'd honestly probably go with like a 6 geography media market area.
Yeah, it's not in Florida, but still a great place. And it's actually, so I make the drive down to Atlanta, pass through there, going to see my brother down there. And it's really not that far from Atlanta in terms of, in proximity. And I'm sure the recruiting overlaps a ton too. So I think there is value to being in that location. Again, SEC territory, you're, right in the thick of it. So I think there is value there. Whereas the media market itself may not be the most attractive, but there is a case for Clemson.
Totally, totally.
All right, so cultural fit.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see a whole lot of cultural fit here with Clemson. When you start looking at, what they do and how they operate, they really kind of operate more as an SEC school, in my opinion. I don't really see any existing rivalries here. You have the rivalry of South Carolina, so when you're comparing that, again, it seems like the cultural fit is probably better with the SEC. Honestly, and then you look at they were another school that was up there with Florida State to really kind of be vying to get out of the ACC. What does the Big Ten think about that? I'd probably go with a 5. I'd even go as low as a 4 here if you wanted to, take them down even one more notch than Florida State.
Yeah, I don't see a great overlap there. And
Yeah.
Football competitiveness. So we hit upon this a little bit.
Yeah, this is a 10 in my opinion, right? 2 national titles, 2016, 2018. They have a good possibility of doing it again this year. They're in the top 4 of the preseason rankings right now. A lot of people consider them a national championship contender this year. And I think with Dabo Swinney, you're not always a national championship contender. Sometimes there might be that, a new quarterback or something like that where people say, yeah, playoff contender, but maybe not national championship. But more often than not, with Dabo Swinney there, the way he recruits, the way he structures the program, and they have their culture, they're going to be a national championship contender more often than not. So I think that deserves them the 10.
Yeah, so it'll be real interesting to see. I mean, look at this. Here they're scoring out at a D, whereas they're kind of viewed nationally as a lock to end up in one of the two conferences. Again, the SEC could say too much overlap, not enough staying power. We have other priorities at this time and only so many spots. So again, there's a world where neither conference ends up wanting Clemson. I don't think it'll happen, but there's a case to be made for it.
Yeah, there's definitely a case. I think the biggest question is going to be what's it look like after Dabo Swinney's gone.
Yeah, that will be a big one. Okay, so Miami, they're kind of the fourth fiddle here in the ACC schools that in terms of realignment, but still, I think an interesting player. So, how do you see them in terms of brand? The U once you at one point was a huge monster brand. They've lost some of that over time. Still a good brand.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the U and everything that they can bring into it, I do think that brand still means something, especially if you bring them back. I lean more toward the 9 than the 8. I don't give them the same brand value as a Notre Dame, but I think they're probably just one notch below them. So it really kind of depends on what you put them on the same level of with Clemson and in Florida State there. Just because they haven't been as good recently, I think there's an argument for 8. However, I think once that brand starts getting going again and they start making the playoffs and winning some playoff games, you're going to see it coming back. You're going to see a lot of Miami fans get out there talking about the U, and you'll see a whole lot more of that, right?
Better that you than the other you that I think of. So, uh, all right. In academics, they are also AAU, and I think they were one of the recent additions. Maybe not, but they are AAU.
Yeah, AAU, private research, kind of school. So they're high up there. Don't think I give them the 10 of a North Carolina, but I think they're still really high up there. Probably a 9, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, okay, geography, Florida. I mean, we've kind of touched upon this already. Miami is obviously a bigger market than Tallahassee. So how do they stack up?
Yeah, I put them up there around where Tallahassee is, or where Florida State is. Probably give them an 8 in my opinion, just because of the media market being that much better. They're a top 20 media market in the United States. So when you think about that, when you think about the number of people that would be interested in them, if the brand can start getting going again, I think there's a high potential here for them. So you look at the geography, getting into a new state, the opportunity there. I think you probably look at 7 or 8, but I'd probably lean toward 8.
That's not a 9 or 10 in terms of new state, huge state, top 20 media market, attractive market, with getting into Miami. I remember I've read somewhere and I have it saved somewhere that somebody did a study showing in terms of markets of Big Ten alumni outside of Big Ten territory. And Miami was right up there near the top. Obviously, Big Ten fans would love to go to Miami to see a game. 8 feels low to me.
If you want to go for 9, we can go 9. I was thinking kind of along the lines of what we did with Florida State earlier, which is they kind of have two options here. So, if it was the only one you're really going for and that's all the option is there, then that would be valued higher. But with the option of Florida State, and then also Florida is down in there as well. UCF is not, I mean, that's not a pushover school down there. They've got what's his name? Scott Frost back, so I could be satisfied with a 9 if you wanted to do that.
Okay. I was going to split the difference with 8.95, but you said it. So,
All right, we'll do
okay.
9.
Um, cultural fit.
Yeah, this is the next part that's really kind of questionable to me. Just like it's kind of been with the other schools here in the ACC. It's like what do they really bring that kind of fits culturally with the Big Ten? They have had some old Orange Bowl clashes with Nebraska, so you could kind of look at a little bit of a resurgence of a rivalry there with them. I do think that there are like some Midwest aspects. If I was really searching for Miami here, you can tell I'm kind of scratching and clawing for something here. But I honestly don't think I'd see above a 6. I'd probably be looking at a 5 or a 4.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't seem like a big fit, and especially like you said, smaller private school, and then also they don't even have like their football stadium on campus. Like there's just a lot of things that just feel out of sorts to me. I think I'd go as low as 4. I think that's fair. If Clemson's a 4, it feels like Miami as well. And then
That's fair.
football competitiveness.
Yeah, football competitiveness. They have national titles. Back when it was the U in the early 2000s, stuff like that. They've really not come back since then. I believe 2001 was the last one because they lost in that 2002 one. But it is a recruiting hotbed,
I don't
so they
remember
just got to
that
get do
one.
what?
I choose not to remember that one, but
Yeah, they don't like that one very much. I get it. But it is a recruiting hotbed, so you get the right guys in there, and they're willing to pay money. So, although I think the football competitiveness will probably be higher in years to come, as it looks right now with them having one of their best seasons in recent memory, and they didn't even make the playoffs, I think you got to put them down at like a 7, maybe an 8 if you're really feeling optimistic about the potential of the future. But 7 or 8 is probably where I'm at.
yeah, I feel like they got to be ahead of UNC. I mean, UNC's been consistent, but I feel like Miami's had higher highs and more potential. And so I would have been fine with 7, but I feel like they got to be ahead of UNC.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So UVA. So what makes UVA interesting to me is they are like UNC in pretty much every level. They're very similar schools except for brand.
Yeah, honestly, when I was looking through and doing this one, I was like, man, I hate to do it, but honestly, like a 2 or 3 for Virginia. This is probably the smallest brand we have out of all the options you've given us here.
And I mean, academics, we don't really need to discuss that one. And geography, I think I mean, there is a little bit of overlap um, in terms of Virginia with Maryland and getting into the DC market. Like that's a lot of the benefit of UVA is that connection with DC because Charlottesville isn't huge, but obviously UVA has a brand throughout the state of Virginia, which is a larger state. I don't know in terms of media market, how do they rank?
Yeah, Charlottesville is barely inside the top 200,
Yeah,
so
but
not
the
great.
UVA is in terms of media market though. I think their reach is bigger than just the Charlottesville area. However, as is the case for any of these, but yeah. So geography, still a big state, still new territory. I don't know, but not quite as appealing as North Carolina.
Yeah, if they had better recruiting, I might go higher with them, but I'm probably leaning toward like a 3 here, but I couldn't go any higher than a 4.
Okay, I'm gonna go four. I think it makes sense in a lot of ways,
Yeah, I
and
mean the DC adjacent kind of thing is a good idea, but even when you think about that, you've already got the Maryland, which is kind of DC there a little bit too. So how much do you really want to feed into that market a little bit more? And then if we're being honest, I mean I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion, but it really seems like Virginia Tech is probably the one that if football gets good, will probably be the one that's looked upon more fondly with more attention there.
yeah, they've definitely been more consistent in terms of football and have the bigger national brand there. Okay, cultural fit.
Yeah, cultural fit for Virginia. I mean, they really do fit really well. They have historical alignment with Maryland and Rutgers kind of operating similar to those two schools. So when you take that into account, I know those are new Big Ten schools, but I mean, they are Big Ten schools. So you take that into account. AAU, it's a public school. I mean, all that stuff. I'm not going to say a 10 here or anything like that, but I could be swayed to an 8 or 9 possibly with the way they kind of operate.
Yeah, I would have been fine either way, 8 or 9. I think they're right there on par with UNC in terms of, uh, and so that I'd match them with UNC on that one. And then football competitiveness. They had a little stretch there with our Bronco Mendenhall,
Hmm.
keeping them at least competitive, but that has since dropped off again.
Yeah, and I don't think I really see them investing the money needed to really become a super competitive football program. I could be swayed into as high as a 5, but honestly, I'm probably looking at more of a
My
4
figure was over
three
that.
or
I
2.
accidentally
Yeah.
pushed you. What were you thinking?
Yeah. 2, I mean, honestly, if you gave it a 2, I wouldn't argue too much with you, but probably 3 or 4 is what I'm
let's let,
thinking.
let's do three. Let's be nice. I mean, they did make I think the Orange Bowl it was
Yeah.
several years ago, but some of that was just being in a weaker division. I will admit, but they got there nonetheless. But
Mhm.
the thing about it, so UVA scores lower, which is why you don't hear about them a lot. There are these drawbacks that we talked about, but a lot of times they're also viewed as a companion to UNC potentially. And how much do you think that UNC might say, "Hey, we really want UVA to be with us," and they still make some sense for both the SEC and the Big Ten. Again, not perfect sense, but if you squint, you can see it. So, do you think that would be enough if they're like, "Hey, we want to land UNC. It's worth it to bring UVA along"?
I mean, it would depend on what they agreed to with the share, right? I mean, SMU agreed to come to the ACC for literally no money. I'm not saying UVA would need to do that, but it'd be something close to that. Maybe a fourth of a share, something like that. I just don't see the super I don't see a super big addition point here financially to really make it be like, oh yeah, we have to have Virginia. It almost be like a charity thing if they let them in. It feels like.
What would be is UNC worth it? Like, does the UNC bring in enough value for both UNC and UVA?
No, not both of
Would
them.
would
No.
be the question.
Yeah,
So
UNC would be very good at on their own, but I don't. They're not USC. USC brought UCLA along, and UCLA. I shouldn't say just that about UCLA. They're a much better football brand and have better history than Virginia, at least as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Virginia fans going to say something in the comments about them versus UCLA that I don't remember, but I, I don't see UNC being able to bring along Virginia like USC and UCLA kind of came together.
Yeah. So it will be interesting because I think that will be a talking point. Again, I just don't know how much of a reality that is for UVA. And then Duke is a similar one because they do have that rivalry, a huge rivalry. Can you imagine having both the top football rivalry in the game between Michigan and Ohio State in football, and then the top basketball rivalry, arguably, between UNC and Duke in the same conference?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a better basketball rivalry. Purdue and Indiana fans are going to get mad at me for saying that, but it's true. I mean, I don't know a better basketball rivalry than Duke and North Carolina. So when you look at brand and everything else, the basketball brand is just so super high, and maybe we didn't take that into enough account for Virginia, but like we said, it is kind of a small percentage of it all. I do think Duke has done some things to improve their brand, though. You know, at one point they were kind of looked upon as just like a plucky little team that can maybe do some things here and there. But you got people saying this year they could go 8-4, 9-3. There's some possibility there for that.
Mhm.
So I'm not gonna put them on North Carolina level or anything like that. But I do think a 5 or a 6 would be fitting.
Yeah, I think they're basketball. I think they are definitely a national brand. Like you say, Duke, people know. You could go anywhere in the country and you'll see somebody rocking, some Duke basketball shorts or something. Like
Hmm.
that wouldn't be unheard of to me. Like UNC in that regard. So I'm going to be generous. I think there's a 6 there. I think it is a big brand, but because it's driven by football, that's all that knocks it. For me, that's what knocks it down. If like you said, if they were even parts, I think that would be higher. But because it's mostly driven by football, I agree with you.
Hmm.
Okay, academics, I think, is another one. I think 10 is fair.
Yep.
Uh, we don't have to debate that. Geography. So a lot of the benefits of being in North Carolina, like UNC, but the assumption is you're already getting UNC. Now you've got an overlap market with a smaller school.
Yeah, I don't have them on my media market thing for some reason, which is weird. But as far as I'm concerned about Duke, I think that like you said, national brand and everything else. They're in the state of North Carolina. You have the rivalry there with UNC and everything else. I'm not gonna say it's. I don't know. Maybe it's on the same level with UNC. If it's not, it's probably close to them. So I'd probably say a 7 or 8. Give you the option there.
Okay. I'd say 7 mostly just because there is that over like the thought is if whoever's getting Duke is also getting UNC, and so
Hmm.
there's going to be overlap. Okay, cultural fit.
Yeah, I think Duke fits pretty well with the Big Ten and everything else. It's kind of like UNC a little bit. You have the academics. There is that little bit of a budding rivalry between them and Northwestern. Not a lot of people recognize that one. So when you take that into account and what they could add there, kind of being like the East Coast version of a Northwestern, but also able to maybe get some better coaches here and there, like a Manny Diaz, and they had Mike Elko before him, and so I think cultural fit, trying to win, good basketball school, rivalry with Northwestern. I'd put them up there at probably an 8 or a 9.
Okay, I'll do 9 just because that's in line with UVA UNC. It feels like kind of on par with them, just to be consistent here. Okay, football competitiveness.
Now I'm not super up on my Duke football history. They don't have a whole lot of history, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I mean, they have their ups and downs. I feel like they're kind of like UNC, where they're actually put together. I think if you went and looked at it, you'd be surprised at how many like pretty decent seasons they've had. But I would say UNC's been a little bit more competitive than Duke, if I'm not wrong.
If I'm looking at the two overall and I say which one's more competitive, I have more of a leniency to UNC. But also, if you ask me, like, oh, okay, why? I'd be like, well, I mean, it just makes sense, UNC, I guess. So I don't really have any strong, feelings about it. So, yeah, probably a 6 or a 7.
Yeah, I'll go with 6, although I guess we should probably go and verify that. This one's actually one that we can. It's pretty easy to look at concrete numbers. at that and compare. Okay, so Duke actually coming in fairly favorably right there with these other top ACC programs. Very
Higher than
interesting.
Clemson.
Very interesting. Yet they're not talked about a lot. They're often talked about as a school that might get left behind, which altogether. But that's another story. So, okay, Georgia Tech is one that you've talked highly on. So I'm excited to get your thoughts on this one. So Brand,
Yeah, I mean historical titles. They're pretty inconsistent, but nice location. They have a really strong recruiting area there, and I think Georgia Tech has shown a willingness to try to not just compete in football, but also be known a little bit better in football. They've had some ranked wins lately. I'm not going to give them super big props on their brand here or anything like that, but because of the history, I'd honestly put them probably close to Duke with like a 6. I would be willing to go with a 5 though if you wanted to talk about the Duke basketball brand, just bringing them up that much more.
yeah, I don't think they could be on the same tier as Duke. I mean, I know they've had some success and stuff, but I think they'd have to be lower than that. Now, academics, on the other hand,
Yeah, academics 10, AAU member, engineering powerhouse. I mean, they're basically Purdue down there in Georgia. It's fine.
geography, you've already outlined that.
Yeah, I love the geography of Georgia Tech. Atlanta area is a top 6 media market. The recruiting, you don't have anybody down there in Georgia. Honestly, Georgia Tech is one of the teams I want the most in the Big Ten. So I'm going to be very favorable to them here. I'm going to give them a 10.
Okay. Cultural fit.
Yeah, cultural fit. When you start looking at some of that stuff, they do get a little bit lower. AAU, they are public, urban kind of southern area, but that engineering focus does give me a little bit more thought to them when you start looking at them more favorably for that. There's not really any significant rivalries with Georgia Tech and any Big Ten teams, so I can't be super favorable there. But I mean, if I'm looking to just try to bring the score up a little bit more, I'd probably go with 6 or 7.
For cultural fit.
But if you wanted to sway me down to like a 4 or 5, I wouldn't argue that much with you.
No, I mean, I think because it's hard because academics for the Big Ten, it feels like is a big part of the cultural vibe, and that is a big component to Georgia Tech. I think I could go with. I'm trying to think. I feel like I just look at Florida State and them at a 5, so I feel like Georgia Tech would still probably be a 6.
Yeah, they probably need to be above Florida State. They're probably not on the same level as maybe a Virginia. Well, maybe. Yeah, 6 or 7. Either one's fine.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see, and maybe 7. I just feel like Atlanta's pretty different from the heart of the Midwest,
Yeah.
but it's more than just that. But I feel like that component impacts it. And then competitiveness. I know Georgia Tech is trying to put things together. They had a good season last year. They're expected to do pretty well this year, but they've been pretty bad for a lot of recent history.
Yeah, they do have 4 claimed national titles. So, if you start looking at the history and stuff like that, but if you're looking at right now, they get some ranked wins here and there, but they're just so darn inconsistent. I feel like. I feel like I want to give them a 6 and kind of put them on that same kind of Duke trajectory there because of the history, but they don't feel like the same football competitiveness as a Duke, at least right now. So I probably would lean toward more of a 5.
Okay. All right. We'll see though. They might make us eat our words here. All right.
Yeah.
So let's shift over. So now we've got Calford here. We're looking at. So again, we talked about these up front. So I don't want to. We don't need to belabor this too much. But these guys, they had their chance, got kind of passed over. But like you said, they do make a lot of sense in many regards. So I'm kind of curious to see how they fit with. I was going to say with the ACC component, but they are still ACC, I guess now. So, all right. So Stanford's brand is interesting. I mean, it depends on the context. Obviously, I think we're looking at it through a football lens. Forever, it was so bad. And then they were like the powerhouse of the Pac 10 and 12 for a long time, and then they've fallen off again. So they're kind of a tough one to nail down.
Yeah, I mean, who sees the tree and doesn't think of Stanford, right? I mean, that's got to be something worth for the brand. So, yeah, I'm not gonna be super high on the brand here for Stanford, just because I don't think like academic brand should bring you up that much higher. Like, we're talking about basketball a little bit here, but we can only give so much when football is really the main driver here, it seems like. So I'd probably go with they are pretty well known out there on the West Coast. It's still so crazy they're in the ACC when they're right over there on the Pacific Coast. But yeah, I'll probably go with a 6.
6. So right up there with Duke.
Yeah, I mean they have the academics and stuff like that, right? I mean, I feel like people on that West Coast out there know that brand pretty well. And then when you're talking about them every now and then, people know Stanford well. It's just, they it's more
That's
because of
true.
academics, like I said, than football or anything like that.
Okay. So what that should have just been in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
We go 10.
Geography. So I know it's the whole California thing, but LA and San Francisco, the Bay Area, all that are very far apart. They're almost like different worlds. And San Francisco is a huge market.
Yeah, when I looked at it here, the San Francisco area is top 10. It fits the West Coast editions, but it also feels like it's just kind of too close to home for the West Coast edition. So, media market, everything else. This is honestly one of the hardest ones to put here because they should be a 10. Being out there on the West Coast, adding more editions there, you could maybe create a pod with, more of a pod with another edition out there. But again, I don't think USC wants more of them. Maybe, but I don't know. If we're looking at geography, there's so many pros, but there's also the major con of USC and everything else. Honestly, I'm probably looking at 6, 5.
A 5.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. I mean, it's the fact you already have the 4 out there, and I don't think they want any more on the West Coast.
Okay, so just the overlap. So I'll go ahead
Yeah,
and put that in here.
yeah, it's kind of the same with Cal.
Well, cultural fit, I feel like it's pretty strong.
Yeah, the Olympic sports really puts it over the top, in my opinion. So you look at the culture and everything else; it's either a 9 or a 10.
I might say 10 for Stanford, whereas like Cal feels a little maybe like a 9. Like
Yeah,
that's more of a vibe thing, but
yeah,
in terms of like everyone out on the hill, not even in the game, just out there smoking weed. Uh, it seems like kind of a different vibe. But
yeah,
let's see. Okay, and then football competitiveness. Like I said, they've been hot or cold.
yeah. I mean, they peaked in the Harbaugh era, right? I mean, Harbaugh showed that you can go to Stanford and win. I don't know if they're going to bend those academic standards enough for them to really be able to be a consistent winner with somebody out there. Andrew Luck's trying to make it happen. Appreciate Andrew Luck being out there and trying to bring somebody up. He brought my Colts up there a little bit, but that only lasted for so long before he had to retire. So, football competitiveness, I lean toward more like I lean toward more like a 6 here.
Oh, they're really
And
bad.
that's a lot, and that's leaning a lot on the Harbaugh peak.
I was gonna say that feels generous, and I
Yeah.
wonder if it'll get. I would almost insist that it's lower because it feels like they have like no interest in trying to be good, except that you're right, they do have Andrew Luck there, and it does seem like that is something, and it will probably take a while to right the ship, but it does seem like that is a focus. So I'll be lenient with them because if it weren't for that component, I'd say it seems like they've lost interest in trying to be competitive with football and are going all in on the Olympic sports, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I'd be
Cal,
fine with 5 or 6. 5 or 6 either one's fine with me.
yeah. So Cal, probably not quite the same brand.
No, I don't think they have the brand to Stanford. I'd honestly probably give them a 4.
I mean, especially because like I remember we're talking about. I was in college at the time, talking to someone, and she said her was talking about her school her brother was looking at, and I kept referring to it as Cal. She's like, it's Berkeley, I was like, oh, sorry. Like nobody, like in terms of academic sense, it's branded very differently than like football, where we think of it as Cal and
Yeah,
or you say UC Berkeley or whatever. But
yeah.
I missed the boat on that one. I was like, I don't know. I look at schools through like a football lens. It was how I was at the time. So, anyway, so yeah, not as strong of a brand. The academics, again, it's kind of branded almost apart, but academics can also go in. I think 10 is fair.
Yeah, 10.
um, and then competitiveness, they've got to be pretty low here.
Yeah, I mean they do have 5 claimed national titles, but they've had their recent struggles, and I don't see them, really having the commitment to somebody like Andrew Luck to really try to help them out there. And they've not had a recent era with any coach that's really been successful really at all there. So you're probably looking at like a 4 or 3, maybe
Yeah,
even lower. I might be too generous.
yeah. Well, let's go with that. um, okay, maybe that is generous, but they beat BYU last time I was at Lavelle Edwards Stadium, although that was maybe more to do with BYU, so I can't knock them completely. But okay, so now I think we've wrapped up with the ACC. You can see I've got ASU there. Move into the Big 12, but with other former Pac-12 schools. ASU is often maybe one of the first of the Big 12 schools to be talked about, and so let's see why. So in terms of brand, how do you think they stack up?
Yeah, not very highly. I mean, they have some regional appeal, but when you talk about like national football brand, Arizona State, they did try, something with Herm Edwards. Obviously, Herm was not the best thing in the world for him. Broke rules, didn't win. It's kind of a bad combination. If you're gonna break rules, you want
At
to at
least
least
win the
win.
national championship, right?
Yeah, yeah. When you got Jeremy Pruitt and Herm Edwards out there breaking rules and not, getting sanctioned, and they're not even winning any games, it's like, So when you look at the regional appeal, it's a slightly higher, but overall, I mean, you're probably looking at a 3 or a 4 on brand here.
Okay. I mean, I do think people know the school. I'll lean towards four because and you don't want to
It's
base
kind
it
of
off
like Cal. Yeah, it's kind of like Cal.
like people know the school. Like you say, Arizona State. Like, yeah, depending on where you're from, you've got some idea. But okay, so academics, they are AAU, if I'm not mistaken, but also not a school that's like normally known for its academics. Which
Yeah, so they are AAU. They do have a growing research profile. So when you sent me this one, I actually looked into it a little bit more, and they do have more research aspects to them than I think people give them credit for. I'm not necessarily going to put them on the level of a Miami and stuff, but because they are growing, they're showing some initiative there. I'd honestly probably go with like an 8.
okay, all right. Geography.
Yeah, Phoenix, huge market area. It's in the top 15. Southwest growth potential. Arizona's kind of a booming state in some ways. Like I said, Phoenix really really popular there. If you're looking at possibly getting out there to the Arizona area, they don't have bad high school football. Every now and then you see a player come out of there and really do well at one of these kind of bigger schools. It's just kind of if Arizona State can identify that talent, bring it in, and work with it. But I don't necessarily think they have the enough recruiting, excuse me, to go around and satisfy the entire Big Ten. So when you look at Phoenix, though, I think that gives them a bump. I'd probably go with a 7 or an 8.
And does being a travel pod, whatever, with USC, UCLA matter? Does that come in?
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That could help. They're far enough away to where they're not really going to take away, but then they're also in their own little regional area down there that's going to help out. So yeah, probably let's lean on an 8.
Actually, they're probably closer than Stanford is, but yeah, in terms of new state, huge market. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
cultural fit.
Yeah, cultural fit. Arizona State. I have on my notes here. They are growing. AAU, public university, stuff like that. I did not find any real rivalries or anything like that. You do have the opportunity with like an Arizona if you were to bring them in too, but I just don't think the brand and
Or with
the
the PAC,
geography.
the former PAC schools.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really connected much with the Big Ten in that area. It really just seems like a great fit for the Big 12, in my opinion. But because I just don't see all that many great fits, I'm probably looking at like a 4 or 5.
And they're also generally known as a very big party school. So for whatever that matters for you, I'll go with 4. I don't have a strong sense. It doesn't seem like the most.
Yeah. I mean, if we wanted to lean on the academics, I guess we did kind of lean on the academics with like Stanford and Cal and like Duke and stuff like that. So maybe they're up at like a 6. But
What's the
it's not.
difference there?
Yeah, we'll go with a 5.
Okay, and then football competitiveness. They, like you said, they've been down for a long time. They're certainly putting resources towards it. They're trying, and that's showing in what they did last year. But you can't base it all just on one year.
Yeah, I mean, really no historical success there. Kenny Dillingham is doing his best. They're trying to get an indoor facility, but I don't know. Even Kenny Dillingham is there, and he is kind of fighting for more investment and getting more people in there. I'm gonna be honest with you, Trevor, and I don't say this because it's a Big 12 school or anything like that. I could see the SEC or the Big Ten, one of those two conferences, firing a coach and coming to Arizona State and saying, Kenny Dillingham, why don't you come to one of these schools that's investing some more money? I could see Arkansas firing their coach and Kenny Dillingham going there this next year. I could just see one of those schools that fires their coach in the SEC or the Big Ten this year calling, and if Kenny Dillingham is not getting what he wants at Arizona State, even though it's all his alma mater, they could seriously consider it.
Yeah, I think that is a strong component, and I do believe that he wants to make it work there. So it might be too soon to see him pull the plug on that. I think that gives him a little bit of extra staying power there at ASU. But yeah, we will see. So where would you rank them?
Yeah, I mean, probably a 3 or 4. Maybe a 5 if you're going to be generous, but yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I mean, I do think they're definitely trending up. It's just hard with so many years that were bad. So that's
Well, and
why.
it's kind of like Dabo, right? How long is it going to stay? If Kenny Dillingham leaves tomorrow, are they gonna stay a top Big 12 contender? I don't know.
Well, I will say in this era though of NIL, when you have such a huge alumni base and you're in that kind of market, like it does feel like those resources, if you're having success, should afford them the ability to go and continue to build on that and get momentum going. And so I feel like the potential is really there. Especially with NIL, it's just going to be interesting to see how they're able to navigate that.
Yeah, let's just see it for more than 1 year, right? Let's see it happen for more than 1 year.
Yeah. And like you said, well, this decision will probably be made in, 27, 28. And at that point, they might have some more data points to say, hey, look at us and improve that. So, okay. Their next door neighbor, often they get thrown in together. I think this one is much lower. Their market is smaller. And why is the cell so much bigger? And let's see. So, but let's just quickly run through. I don't know how serious Arizona is. It's just I've seen sometimes, they get bring in the Arizona schools, but I think their brand probably similar.
Yeah, I'd go with a 3, a little bit smaller brand.
3, yeah, that's fair. And then academics, I think they're AAU. I don't really know.
Yes,
Stacked up.
they're AAU, very strong in the sciences. So I give them the same as Arizona State, maybe a 7, just because not the research, but 8 or 7.
Okay. I think that research is a big component. Geography, I think it maybe a 7. You're still getting in, like if you struck out on ASU, but you really wanted to be in Arizona, like it gives you that, but it's not Phoenix.
Yeah, it's not Phoenix. It's Tucson, and Tucson is top 65 in the country, but it's not top 15 like Phoenix is. So, if I'm being generous, 7, but probably more realistically a 6.
But still, like, in terms of a new state, new territory, I don't know, the whole being out west, travel partner. I think there's a lot of value to that. Although I think, like you said, the ASU is the bigger brand, which might extend across media markets within the state a little bit better than Arizona. I could be wrong, but based on alumni base and things. So cultural fit, similar.
Yeah. Similar to Arizona State here, you're looking at, strong academics, stuff like that, but really not a whole lot that really fits the Big Ten scene, much more fitting the Pac 12, Big 12 kind of scene here. I'd honestly probably go with the five, same as Arizona State.
And then competitiveness, they've been kind of the same as, I mean, except they didn't have last year. So
Yeah, they had some contention in the Pac-12. Were they still in the Pac-12 when Jed Fish had that year that they were kind of up in the top 10?
yeah,
So they've had some competitiveness there, but I mean, honestly, I might give them a three just because they don't seem to have as much momentum as in Arizona State. But I could see if we wanted to give them the same as Arizona State, I wouldn't have a
I think
problem with
that's fair. I think just to give them credit for the momentum they have. All right, here's the favorite one that we hear about all the time is Utah with man, they love to think that they're a shoe in, and I'm just thinking like, I think Utah's probably on the watch list. I just like how many spots do you think there are because you've got to be down. So let's do this score and see just how they stack up with these other schools.
and say I feel like every number I give, you're gonna be like, well, let's go one lower. So, no, did you hear
No,
what I said when we talked about Utah in one of our episodes?
I did not.
Yeah, I said, hey, actually, there's another school in Utah that has a very hungry fan base and is very willing to spend some money on their school. And you know what? Give me some religion in the Big Ten. We don't have very much. Okay, give me BYU over Utah.
Hey, I love it. I love it. Now notice I'm being I'm trying to be realistic here. I don't see BYU as being a good fit. They're not really talked about. So I didn't even put BYU on this list. It might be
Yeah.
interesting to see at least measure it and see where we think they would come up. But I think that religion aspect and not being AAU, although they are improving in several research areas and getting some new I think R1 status, whatever. But that's different, and that was something that I think impacted them with the Pac-12 or getting in there. So, anyway, that being said, let's look at Utah. I'll do my best to be fair here. Brand, I think because of recent success, they actually have a decent brand nationally. I think they're thought of like if you say Utah, I think in terms of athletics and things people look at and probably think of them highly.
Yeah, they don't really have much of a historical brand, but they do have that kind of Big 12 powerhouse thought there. I know they weren't really that last year, but they're top four in the odds to win the Big 12 this year, and I think that they're usually going to be up around that range as long as Kyle Whittingham is there. So we'll see what happens after Whittingham is gone. But I mean, if we're putting Duke and some of these other ones with higher ones up there, I know they don't have the basketball of Duke, but I think they're probably a six or a seven when you start thinking about the Big 12 and how fondly people seem to see them compared to other Big 12 schools.
I think seven seems fair. Kind of different reasons than UNC, but they couldn't certainly be an eight if you got Clemson there, and they do feel like probably better than Duke, at least in terms of if you're taking mostly football into what did we say 7?
Yeah.
Uh, I think that's fair. What's this one too? Okay, and then academics. I mean,
Yeah, they're not AAU, correct?
no, I think they are.
Oh, they are. Okay, they must just got it. Okay. R1, but less prestigious than some of their peers I have written down here. So, yeah, not an Arizona State level, but still respected. So I'd probably give them a six or a seven.
Okay. Yeah, they are. I was just double checking. They are AAU.
Okay.
6 or 7. Oh, that feels generous. They might not even be the sixth or seventh best in the state.
Well, the AAU brings it up a little bit more.
Okay.
Like
All right.
if they weren't AAU, they'd probably be down toward the five or four range. But with the
Yeah.
AAU, six or
Yeah.
seven probably.
Yep. Geography.
Yeah, Salt Lake City, top 30, market out there. So you have some
Growing.
interest there. Yeah, it's 27th I have on my numbers here. So top 30, that's pretty interesting. But like I said, once you get outside of the top 20, it's kind of like how valuable are these really and compared to some other ones? So they're up there. They have some potential there with Utah being a state that more and more people are seemingly going to as California kind of loses some people. They seem to be kind of going to Utah in some cases. So there is some potential there. And then Utah doesn't really have a lot of great football talent right now, as far as what I've seen. But I mean, the more they grow, you would think they would get more and more. And you have had some what's his name? The 5-star quarterback was Ryder Lyons. Was he from Utah?
He's from Oregon.
Yeah,
Zach
he's from
Wilson
Oregon.
was from Utah. Utah actually has
Zach
a
Wilson was, yeah.
surprising amount of talent. Now I don't know, per capita or any of that, but yeah, nonetheless, I think it's a well kept secret. But yeah, it's not generally thought of in the same regards as some of these other states.
Yeah, I think it's rising. I think there's the potential there for it to keep getting better. Obviously, schools in that area are going to benefit from that, but it's not like a California. It's not like a Florida. So yeah, for my geography, I had written down here. I had TV market, recruiting, all that stuff. I had them as a 6.
Okay. All right. Cultural fit.
Yeah, I mean, AAU, R1, kind of Western culture, similar to maybe some of the other possible ads here. I had them written
Nobody
down as
likes him in the
a.
Big 12, so there's
What'd you
that.
say?
I said nobody likes him in the Big 12, so
Well,
there's
and the Big 12 doesn't like the Big 10 very much, so maybe
maybe.
it's a good cultural fit. Yeah, I was thinking like maybe a 6 or a 7. There is some bit of a rivalry there with Washington, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, they kind of seem like a 6 merchant right now. So let's just keep going 6.
Okay, 666. That sounds right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got football competitiveness. We have to take last year into account. Also, take into account that they haven't beaten their rival for several years. So we want to throw that out there as well.
Hey, you're just leading the rivalry in both of them. Look at that hat you got on, man. You're just kicking all your rivals'
You know,
butts. You gotta love that.
I was on the opposite side of it in both regards for many years. They both were going on a bad stretch at the same time, which was no fun. So yeah, both are fortunately can keep that going, but at least they're on top right now.
There you go. Yeah, cherish it while it's there, because as somebody who Ohio State fan, you think it's gonna last forever. It doesn't last forever. Eventually, the other one pokes up there, and you're like, ah. All right. Yeah. So Utah, no national titles. They did recently win that Big 12 championship. That was kind of a crazy year, and they've had some quarterback issues, but they still kind of remained being a team that has some juice and people are excited about. Like I said, top 4 in the Big 12 odds this year. I think it's going to take some, a couple, 2 or 3 bad years in a row for them not to be thought of as somebody that can potentially win the Big 12 year in and year out. So, yeah, I honestly, I know it's going to sound bad, but I had a 6 written down for him again.
Oh, really? I would have put. I'm trying to see what we put for some. Oh, we had Duke as a 6, UNC as a 7. They've got to be above that. I'm gonna.
Well, the no national titles thing for me was one of the
I
ones
see.
that's like, if you have some history, like Georgia Tech, they have some history, just not recently.
Well,
So that's
Utah
why I kind of leaned on
will be
that.
the
But
first to remind anyone that they've been to and lost 2 Rose Bowls, and they also think that they won a national championship back in was it '08. So they have that
yeah,
claim, but
yeah,
that's
Florida
fair.
definitely won it then. But that's a nice thought there.
So what did you say? I guess
6
7.
or 7, yeah,
I
seven's
I
fine.
think they've been consistently good enough over the last several years. They deserve some credit, but all since they don't have the history,
Look
uh,
at you, giving them
I'm
more
being
credit than I am. You're a nice rival.
uh, my dad's a Ute, so I get it. I can't be
Okay,
too
yeah,
hard.
don't let him watch this episode.
Yeah.
He'll be real unhappy with the 666 there.
Uh, Fortunately, I don't have any relatives that are Ohio State, so
So you have to live that. That's good.
I don't have to be as generous there. Kidding, but not really. So Colorado, I put them in there just because they seem similar enough as to some of these other ones, and you have Coach Prime, like they have enough juice right now. It feels like, the market, Denver, whatnot, they're at least worth exploring here. If you're going to go out west and look at schools, and that becomes a big component of the expansion and trying to link, you got Nebraska to bring in a Colorado. So anyway, so I thought it was worth at least exploring this one.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Dabo and what he does for the brand of Clemson. I don't think there's any more of a conversation here than Dion and the brand he gives to Colorado. I'll be honest. I thought Dion was gonna, I thought he was gonna, kind of like retire with his whole health stuff and everything. But he came back to Colorado, and it kind of surprised me. I do think he strengthened that brand even after he's gone. I think that brand has a little bit of staying power. Some of the uniforms and some of the stuff that they've done, the cool stuff like that. I don't think it stays for super long unless they keep winning. But I don't know. This is probably the hardest brand to gauge.
That's
Honestly,
tricky.
I just do a 5 because it's like, okay, either way.
That's fair. I mean, at the moment they have a bigger brand, but it's all wrapped up in
It's
Prime.
all Dion. Yeah.
And so their next coaching hire after Prime is going to be one of the most important decisions that they make to see if they can keep that staying power and maintain that brand.
Joe
Academics,
Klatt. Hire Joe Klatt.
yeah, hey. So academics, I'm pretty sure they're AAU as
Yeah,
well.
they are AAU. I have them down here. Strong research facility. I think this is probably the strongest aspect of Colorado that gets them in the conversation. I think they're probably either an 8 or a 9. I might go with an 8 just because that's what we gave Arizona State because they're kind of known for that research as well. But I wouldn't argue with you if you gave them a 9.
Okay. And then geography. Again, kind
Yeah,
of
geography.
bridging that west, you butt up against barely, maybe existing territory.
Yeah, so media market is 16th, so just shy of the top 15th there. They are top 20, though. The Rocky Mountain area, they kind of fit the same geographical area as Nebraska a little bit. Not super strong recruiting, but the Denver area does give them a little bit more. What do we give Arizona State? We gave them an 8.
8, yeah.
Yeah, I might give them a 7.
7. Okay.
Denver strong media market. So
And cultural fit. Like I was talking about, I mean, you get that rivalry with Nebraska. Is that enough to give them a little bit of a boost?
yeah, especially the research in there as well, right? They have their historic Big Eight, and which already have Nebraska in from there, and that rivalry. I mean, that rivalry is more heated this past year or past 2 years than I really thought it was. So if we could reignite that would be pretty cool. AAU strong, research, stuff like that. They're probably above Arizona State, but I don't know if I have them as high as like a Duke or something like that. Probably do an 8 or a 7, but I could be convinced a 6 is. No, they're probably more than Utah, so probably an 8 or a 7.
Okay. I'm trying to think. I don't really know. So I'm going to split the difference there on that one.
Okay.
I'm deferring to you, but let's see. So football competitiveness. I mean, they do have strong history if you're looking back at the 90s, but then, I mean, since Utah or since they joined with Utah to the Pac-12, I mean, they're at the basement.
Yeah. They do have the title in 1990, so give them the credit for that one. It's just how relevant are they going to continue to be? How competitive are they going to continue to be even after Dion leaves? I think that they want to be competitive. I mean, they hired Mel Tucker, who went to Michigan State right away, and he kind of had an okay season there. And then who was the guy they brought in after him? He wasn't very good for very long. And then Dion, so. I'm not really convinced they have a whole lot of staying power there, and they're doing all right now. But I'd like to see what happens this season before I really put them up there. Honestly, if we're gonna give Arizona State and Arizona a 4 and a 3, I'm probably looking at a 5 or a 4 here.
Okay. Trying to look at some of these other ones. I'm gonna put I gotta put 4. I mean, if we have ASU at 4, I don't see how we can put them above that because ASU had like a legit year, whereas Colorado had like a
Yeah.
pretty good year.
It's kind of that title, it's however much you kind of value that title and working off of that, but it's nearly 35 years ago now, so.
Yeah. I mean, I do, but for competitiveness, they've been
Hmm.
way worse than ASU for longer. I'd almost put them lower than that, actually, to be perfectly honest. Um,
Yeah, I could do 4 or 3, either one. If you want to give them a 3, I wouldn't argue.
I mean, I'm not about what I want; it's about what's right. No, I'm kidding. It's actually I'm going to. They were so bad for so long, and while they've been good and competitive under Coach Prime, it's been 2 seasons of last year was rough and then or the year before was rough and then last year was like pretty good. So not
Hmm.
enough to erase all that. And I put Kansas in here because once upon a time Kansas made a lot of sense for the Big Ten when it felt like everything needed to make sense geographically and fit in that sense. Since like that went out the window with adding the California schools, or I guess really the West Coast schools, maybe that's less important. But I still think Kansas is an interesting player in this one.
Yeah, is Kansas our last one? Who else do you have in there?
I got one more, and that's our SEC. So
Oh, okay, our SEC one there. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I mean Kansas, not really much brand. I mean, if you want to get on the basketball aspect of it, they're probably not the same brand as like a Duke is or anything like that, but they are higher up there. But I
with
mean, it's been
basketball,
well. I mean, like I said, they're not with Duke right away, but they're high up there in basketball. Um, but football, there's relatively no brand, um, unless I'm mistaken. What would
uh,
you give them? I'd give them something low.
I'd say no. I don't know if Duke's a 6. For me, I feel like they've got to at least be a 6. They're more.
Yeah, Duke has the UNC rivalry too, right? I mean that helps the brand as well.
Yeah, but
Who's Kansas's rival that helps their national brand really be elevated?
I don't know if they necessarily have one. Although I feel like they're always, you always see in the beginning of the season they're in those invitationals and stuff with like a Michigan State or type of school. I don't know. Maybe it's not Michigan State, but I feel like they're always there. They're definitely a blue blood. I think they are a national brand. The problem is that it's all wrapped up in basketball, but they've
Yeah,
been better
exactly.
at football in recent history. I don't think that they're a no brand. I think they're right there with Duke. In fact, I don't know. In my opinion, they're definitely ahead of Georgia Tech. If Georgia Tech is a 5, I
Well, but
just
Georgia Tech has history, right? They have some claimed national titles and stuff like that.
but is that fitting in brand? Are they going to double dip with competitiveness as well as brand? Like,
Yeah, so when I look at national titles for competitiveness, it's like you've been there before, so there is the potential of getting back to something like that. When I look at it for brand, it's like okay, this is a piece of power within this program that you can point back to and be like, well, we did win a national title or we did claim a national title. So there are aspects of that. It's kind of considered for both, but not exactly the same way, in my opinion. If you wanted to give them the 6, that's fine.
yeah, I'm also looking at Colorado right next to them. They were so bad. Although Kansas that was their national brand too. They were also at the dregs of football for so long. I think they're coming back. They are making more of an investment, but that would probably come more into. I don't know. I just think if Duke, it's that I feel like they're right there with Duke in terms of not a great football brand, but such a big national basketball brand, which is where UNC is getting most of their juice. Let's be honest, in terms of realignment, and that's going a long way. And so, um, okay, academics, they are AAU.
Yeah, AAU, strong research, potential, not potential, strong research, thought process, mindset there. R1, strong emphasis on the funding for research as well. Honestly, they're not Stanford, but th're really high up there, so I'd probably give them a 9.
9. Okay. Geography, Kansas. Like I said, once upon a time, that made perfect sense, but maybe not as
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Their geographics look like it's right outside of the top 30 TV market wise, so it looks like it's
Price it's that high.
31st. Um, yeah, uh, I don't feel great about their media market geography here. It's an okay TV
Does
market,
still
but
fitting
overall
in with
there's
that
we're
traditional Big Ten Midwest vibe carry any weight, or is that like not an
yeah,
element?
I would give that vibe more to cultural fit. I feel
Oh,
like wouldn't
okay.
wouldn't you or no?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think media market geography here, you're probably looking. They don't have as big of a market as Utah, so I'm probably looking at like a 5, maybe 4 here.
Okay.
Just no real recruiting. It's kind of like Iowa, but worse.
Yeah.
So
Okay. The cultural fit. So that is where
yeah, this is where it's a 9 or a 10 for me. AAU, actually a land grant institution that's big in the Big Ten as well. Academic research, all that stuff really kind of fits in that Iowa, Nebraska range as well. Basketball, yeah, I'd say a 9 or a 10.
okay.
And
Yeah,
look
I
at the
think
rivalries. Let me check the
10. Yeah.
rivalries really fast. So they're also from the Big Eight, Big 12 history as well. They have had recent matchups with Illinois for
Oh, that's right.
some potential with the rivalry there, but really their primary rivalry is Missouri, which is in the SEC. So if the lack of a rivalry, if we wanted to put in there a 9, I think that'd probably be fair.
I think it would. That's fine. I think that would. I mean, there's probably some with Nebraska because of the history, and some. I'm sure that you go back, they've played a lot of those other Midwest schools over the years. But yeah, you're right. No real rivalry, so I think that's fair. And then football competitiveness. So much like Colorado, they were really bad for a long time. They're pretty good. They took a little bit of a step backwards last year, but they really are investing. They're building a new stadium. They've shown that like they want to be competitive. They have, I think, the name brand and the prowess to probably build on that if they play their cards right. But they're also overcoming a deep history of very, very bad football.
Yeah, I mean it's Indiana level of bad history here with Kansas. So you're looking at that history and what the ability to build off of there. You won't really have much, but Leopold's a really good coach. I mean, there's some people that when you take into account not just strictly wins and stuff like that, but what they're doing with where they're at. Some people have Leopold like in the top 10. So
I
he's
think
not on the same Deion Sanders level of like, it's going to, who knows if it's going to stick after he leaves because, like you said, Kansas is putting in money here, but it also doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence that they're just going to pick up right where Leopold left off. So probably go with a 4. I don't know. Is that too much given it over Colorado? I mean, Colorado
I
at
might
one
put them.
point was contending for the Big 12 last year.
Yeah, Kansas easily could have. They have, quarterback. They have talent there, and probably should have. They underperformed last season, so I don't know. I think putting them right there with the Colorado level, I think is fair enough. Um, just a lot of not great history, but pretty good recent history. So I think that's fair. That is interesting. It's just how things have played out. I think they kept thinking they were going to get that invite any day, especially when Texas and OU were leaving. They thought, I think they thought they were a shoe in, and it just hasn't come. And
Mm-hmm.
um, potential's there. But so this is an interesting one. You've talked about this. I think you even talked about this last year when I had you on. So A&M, make the case for A&M leaving the SEC, where they spent since the 90s, or maybe I think it was maybe even the 70s, trying to get into the SEC. They're finally there, or they've been there for a while. But so make the case for them leaving to go to the Big Ten.
Yeah, so the biggest rumblings you hear about Texas A&M possibly considering the Big Ten over the SEC is really the fact that the SEC brought Texas in, and Texas A&M was not in love with the addition of Texas to the SEC. Now, I get it. It seems kind of like USC to me a little bit. It's kind of like, suck it up, Buttercup. We're trying to build a really good conference here, so get over it. Texas, you can share some room there, but Oklahoma too. It's like, Oklahoma kind of feeds off a little bit of that Texas, the state of Texas for their program as well. So there's just an aspect here of Texas A&M. They seem like one of the schools that doesn't fit the SEC super well culturally. I mean, they do have the rivalry with Texas now being in there, but it feels like there is a fit issue there, and you know the academics and some of that stuff feels like it might be better suited for the Big Ten. If the Big Ten were to go after an SEC school, I used to think it might be Missouri because they are kind of Midwest, but they seem to kind of fully ingratiate themselves into the SEC. I think Texas A&M, with the opportunity to get into Texas here, I think this might be probably the best shot the Big Ten has if they want to steal a team from the SEC.
I think you're right. Missouri, I used to, before all this happened, I used to think, and they were actually, I think, a contender at one point before Nebraska was added. I think they were kind of in the mix with some of those rounds of realignment for the Big Ten. Uh, and they could fit. They're right there in between. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they're settled on the SEC and A&M. I think that mere fact they were trying to get away from Texas, and now Texas is there, and I know they're not like super thrilled about that. So I think that alone could be the big aspect of what triggers them if they were to leave. But now we talk about why they might want to leave the SEC. But now let's talk about their fit in the Big Ten. Does it really make sense? So in terms of brand,
Yeah, this is a sneaky brand for me. I did a little bit of research on this one as we were going into it, as I already had some research done, but I just wanted to confirm some things. And in 2025, you have both the New York Times with the Athletic and Sports Illustrated both putting Texas A&M in the top 15 brands in all of college football. It seems like a stretch to me, but there were some good points made about the valuation of everything. Nearly $1 billion valuation of the school they were putting them at. They said that the SEC does help them, but boy, Johnny Manziel really helped that school out, really grow their fan base, and they do have some recruiting power. And like I said, the just the brand of Texas with football, just the brand of that state, and how much football means to that state. I'm not going to say they're a 10 or anything like that, but top 15 program, according to some credible source or some credible sites out there. The state of Texas combined into it. Honestly, I kind of hate to say it, but I feel like an 8 or a 9 is probably right here.
they are a big brand. I feel like 9 seems high. I'm trying to look at this. Yeah, we've got Clemson's at an 8. I think I'll settle. I think 8 feels right. So if you're saying 8 or
It
9,
just kind
that
of depends on what you give to that Texas aspect to it, right? If you don't give much to the Texas, yeah, probably 7 or 8. But if you give a lot to that Texas, you're probably looking at a 9. So I think eight's a good one
the
in the
thing
middle
is
there.
they get talked up a lot, and then they very rarely ever are able to back it up, which I know is more our competitiveness category. But so that's where I think they've lost steam. It's like how many times do you fool us before
It's
you
kind of
kind
like
of
USC, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, except USC, I think the problem is USC was starting from, for me, a higher point and had done more in more recent history, that they have longer to fall before they kind of fall out. Whereas
mhm.
A&M, they weren't quite at those levels and they've done less. And so to me, yeah, I just think they're kind of a notch below some of those. But
Yeah,
and
USC is probably a 9 or a 10, so an 8 for Texas A&M makes sense.
yeah, I think that. And then academics, like you said, they do fit better.
Yeah, so AAU member, robust research funding, R1 status as well. I mean, they're recognized as one of the top public research universities. I mean, a lot of this aligns with the Big Ten's academic values. I know it's going to sound crazy to put Texas A&M on the same level as Stanford when it comes to academics, but honestly, you look at what Texas A&M values, the AAU status, what the Big Ten values. You're probably looking at a 10 here, but I could be swayed into a 9.
Okay. I would say 9 probably just because they're not at known in those circles. They're not like on that tier, like in like all the college rankings and things like that. Um, I just couldn't put them at the same level as a Stanford or a UVA or something. But yeah, that's impressive though in terms of fit. And some of that will be compensated in the cultural fit too. So
Mm-hmm.
geography, I mean, it's Texas.
Yeah, it's Texas. College Station, that's outside the top 100, but College Station is around Dallas Fort Worth area and Houston, and both of those are in the top 8. Dallas Fort Worth is top 5. So you look into the possibility of other places around them there. I mean, Houston, yes, that's a good. I wouldn't even say it's good. Like that's a place there in Houston that's got some good football here and there, but overall, like if you're really want to go for some excitement, if Texas A&M has a Johnny Manziel going or something like that, you're going to get a lot of people from those areas tuning in. I think that does matter there. So, but overall, yes, getting into Texas is good, but Texas is also very, very saturated. A lot of schools down there, and like I said, you got like Oklahoma kind of picking into Texas as well. But this is the school that Nebraska wants so bad, so they can start feeding into Texas a little bit again too. And if they're able to make that happen, I think that just helps Nebraska even more. I'll probably give Texas A&M a 7 here because you have some potential, but at the same time, you're not really in Houston or Dallas Fort Worth.
I just think that their alumni base is so much bigger than that, and it's a wealthy alumni base, and which I guess is different than geography. But I think that, and it's just getting into Texas, it's getting into SEC territory. I don't know how it's on the level of Colorado, although not that Colorado's bad. Um, I'm trying to
Oh, I
think.
guess we did. I guess we did do Colorado there. I didn't even have them next to my Colorados and stuff like that when I said that. All right. What do we have? Miami. Miami's a 9. Georgia Tech's a 10. Um, yeah, you're really not looking at anybody else down there in Texas. Yeah, we could do a. If Arizona State's at an 8.
I don't. I To me
Yeah,
that sounds like a
8 or
nine.
9.
If you're
Yeah.
not sold on where in Texas, or because Texas is saturated, it's true. But
But you still have just as much opportunity there with Texas A&M than you do Arizona State. So if we're gonna give Arizona State an 8, we got to go with a 9 here for Texas A&M. Yeah.
granted, pro sports, like you said, it's saturated like in Houston and Dallas, but being between those markets is better than I would argue being in Austin, which is smaller. But again, in Austin, they're the only show in town. So I guess there's
Mm-hmm.
an argument to be made for that. Um, okay, cultural fit. I mean, it's an agricultural school by history. I don't know how much of that roots is still there, but that seems a little bit off, maybe from some of the Big Ten. Maybe I'm wrong.
It does, but also land grant institution, AAU member, large enrollment, research focus. Honestly, when I was doing some of my research, there was some cultural connections to like a Purdue and Nebraska here with some of the agricultural stuff. Purdue obviously much more known for their engineering, but they do have some agricultural stuff there as well. So, if we're gonna look at cultural fit and what other cultures in the Big Ten are doing, they actually fit pretty well. And then you also look at, like you mentioned, the large alumni base, which I was going to bring up here
Okay.
at the cultural fit too. You're probably looking at a 9 again.
Okay. So 9.
Yep.
And competitiveness, I don't know, man.
Yep. This is where it hurts a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, oftentimes overrated. They get ranked highly up there. They don't really perform. Last year, they did perform there for a little bit, but they didn't maybe finish the season as well as maybe some of their fans would have liked. So, yeah, if we're looking at competitiveness here, what do we give Utah? We give Utah a 7. What do we give some of the other ones? I don't want to put them on
Yeah, let me
as.
scroll over here. I
Yeah,
mean,
if
if
we're looking
Duke is
at.
a 6, A&M's got to be above that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Utah's a 7. North Carolina's a 7. If I'm not mistaken, what's their? They have 3 claimed national titles. Really strong resources. It's not. It's not their fault that that recruiting class did not work out. That was all Jimbo Fisher. Um, Man, it can't be the same as Utah because it's just too high of resources. I'd say
I,
8.
I'm fine with 8. Again, they're
Yeah.
start with high expectations, don't quite meet them, but okay. So actually, that might be our second or third strongest. Oh, our second highest score on here. So let's go through and rank them all. I should have made like a composite slide that brought all this over so we could compare, or I could zoom out maybe we could see them all. But let's see here. That might be too small. Can you see that enough? But um,
Yeah, it's a little small. That's okay though. You can read them off.
okay. Well, what if I? Oops. Stretch my screen out here. Does that? Okay, it's not quite. Okay, so we've got Notre Dame at 9.2, so that's A minus. UNC 8.2, then Florida State only a 7.2, Clemson 6.6, Miami 7.8, a high C there. UVA 5.6, Duke 7.6, although often overlooked. Georgia Tech, I think, a strong candidate, but we only came up with a 7.2. But I think that market plays a big part, and academics play a big part in them. Stanford makes a lot of sense with 7.4, but because of USC, everything we talked about maybe seems unlikely. They had their chance. Same with Cal at 6.2. Arizona State, there's a case to be made, especially with a couple more years of success, but right now only a 5.8. Arizona less so at 5. Utah, who thinks that they're a shoe in to get into the Big Ten, only a 6.4. And a D, guys, it's not great. Colorado a 6. Kansas 6.2. So they might also have to wait for that invitation to come. And then A&M at 8.6. So, all right. So again, remind me of who who your top selections were, and kind of curious to see how they scored out.
Yeah, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Texas A&M were all kind of up there. Texas A&M had a bit of the caveat of like SEC. I don't know if you're going to be able
Yeah.
to get them out of there. Stanford was also up there, but they also had the caveat of kind of being rejected already. But really, I mean, the other ones that are pretty high up there were the ones that I thought of, which was Clemson, or not Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and Georgia Tech. So, you kind of got some fringe ones outside of those, but you're really looking at Notre Dame, North Carolina, Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, Virginia, possibly in there, but I just don't know if there's enough power in that brand and football competitiveness. And then, you could possibly look at a Duke to come with UNC. Those two together seem powerful-ish enough. I don't know. It just depends on what the Big Ten wants.
Yeah, certainly have options. A lot of schools have a case to make, but just as easily, I think that's what's so interesting is the domino effects. If you game this out, there are scenarios where really good candidates could find themselves not in either conference just because of priorities. Just like you see somebody slip in the draft sometimes, you could see that happening here, like a Duke, like a Georgia Tech, even a Miami or somebody. So I think the only shoe-ins are, at some point Notre Dame has to, like, where it's not viable, then they're shoe-in, and then UNC, it seems like between the two conferences, they'll have a home. Other than that, everybody else is going to have to, continue to step it up and make a strong case for themselves over the next couple years.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Very, very interesting. Very insightful. Appreciate the conversation. This was a lot of fun. This is something that's been on my mind. I was years ago going to, I wanted to do like a real um, analytical formula like this and score them all out. And it wasn't, the value wasn't worth it, because I think most of these we can look at and at least kind of like gauge it and do kind of a gut check on most of these and get pretty close to what you do with the hard numbers, and without really being inside the Big Ten, knowing where their heads are at. I don't think we could necessarily nail that down exactly anyway. So I think this gives us a pretty good look at how these schools rank, and so it'd be very interesting to see when, if and when, which most likely when, this all happens, how it shakes out. So anyway, well, thank you so much. I shouldn't have left it to this point. I did mention the Big Ten Huddle, but go ahead and plug your stuff for us, JR.
Yep, the Big Ten Huddle, talking every single Big Ten team. Over there, we don't give any priority to any certain team or anything like that. We talk all the teams and have a good time doing it. Me and my co-host Zach, I got my co-host Jeff on certain episodes as well. We're gearing up for the season. It's going to be a good time. Can't wait. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all those good places, Twitter, everything like that. We post social media content as well.
Okay, and I'll put links to that in the show notes below. Thanks so much. Do go check his stuff out. It's a good show. I've checked out episodes, and really good graphics, really good quality, a good conversation. So I love it. That's one reason why I was so motivated to do this chart. I was like, I got to throw some colors on there to try to get to your level just a little bit. So anyway, we'll appreciate it so much. Do go check it out, learn about the Big Ten, follow all of that, and please make sure you like and subscribe here as well. And as always, go Cougs. I should change hats here. I'm back on. We're done with Big Ten. I'm back, Cougars. Go Cougs.
See ya. Thanks.